There's just a little bit left in the last verse of chapter 4 that I want to look at before we move on to chapter 5. As we've been trying to make the connections here of looking at everything that Jesus has taught here in chapter 3 and 4, the parables that Jesus has taught and the events that are taking place around Jesus at this time. Here at the end of chapter 4 is the event of the calming of the sea, and we see they wake Jesus up because they are terrified. They think they're convinced they're going to die. Jesus confronts them with the fact that they have no faith. And we talked about all of that last Sunday morning. When we get to verse 41, the sea has been calmed. And we talked about when he says, "Hush, be still," and the wind died down, it became perfectly calm. That word perfectly, megas, is a word that it was unusually calm. It was maybe even kind of one of those eerie calmness that was given to the sea. They recognized this is different. But because of what took place, in verse 41, they became very much afraid, and they said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" And so, literally, this could read, they feared a great fear. They were now afraid, but where is their fear directed now? It was directed at the sea earlier. Where is their fear directed now? At Jesus. And this is a fear of awe. They are because of the incredible event that they've just seen. This isn't the first incredible thing that they've seen. But this was everything they've seen so far impacted somebody else. In chapter 3, the man with the withered hand, he was healed. The other miraculous events at Jesus, the casting out of demons, those types, it affects other people. This affected them. And so the fear and the emotion that had been built up, and now they see the power of Jesus and what he has done for them, and that fear has turned around. And the question they ask demonstrates, though, that they still lack faith. The question, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, our word obey here, I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but the word obey is actually, in the Greek, it's one of our key words. It's our word akouo. What is akouo usually translated as? To hear or listen. But that's the word that's used. You remember when we've talked about this word when Jesus says, "To him who has ears to hear, let him hear." We have the word akouo. This word for hear is not just hear the sounds of what's being said. It has attached with it the idea of listening to something with the intent to obey it. And we see that actually in the translation here in this verse. They actually translated the word obey instead of hear, because they understand, or the Greek scholars that are doing the translating, they understand the connection here of this word akouo. So when we see this word and it's translated hear or listen, it's not just listen to me. Well, it is kind of, it is. It's like a parent when they tell their children, listen to me. You didn't want them just to take in the information and then not do anything, right? You expected them to take in the information and then do what you told them to do. And that's what is connected with this word. And so, but they have yet to make the connection of who Jesus is. Now we see their faith is growing. They now have a different type of respect for Jesus now because of this event. But they're still asking the question, who is this guy? They haven't quite made that step. Maybe they're starting to think it, but they're not willing to come out yet and declare it of who they think this Jesus is. But they should have known. And I think we looked at some of the passages last week. these verses, Psalm 65 and verse 7. Did we look at some of these? Okay. Psalm 65 verse 7, Psalm 89 verse 9, Psalm 107, 29. There, in every one of those, speaking of God and the power of God, and every single one of those describes God calming the seas. And so if they were students of their Old Testament, if they were students of the Psalms, they shouldn't have to ask the question, who is this? Because as soon as he calms the sea, it should immediately be known, this is God. Because God is the one who calms the seas. But they just have not quite made that connection yet. So when we get to chapter 5, the sea has been calmed. They're out at sea. They're on their way across the Sea of Galilee. And in verse 1 it says, and they came to the other side of the sea into the country of the Gerasenes. Now, this land belonged to the Jews at one time. We'll talk about this more in just a minute. But it has been given back to the Gentiles at the time that Jesus was here. When they arrive at this point, it is a Gentile society that's this area of the Gerasenes. In verse 2 it says, when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had been often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gashing himself with stones. Okay, this was a scary guy. This was one strong guy who had been giving these people a lot of trouble. This was somebody they had become fearful of. They'd obviously had a lot of problems with this guy because they've tried to chain him. They've tried to shackle him. And even when they did, they weren't able to. And so, note just a couple of the things it says here. It says that no one was able to bind him anymore. Maybe at one point they did, but not anymore. It says in verse 4, no one was strong enough to subdue him. But here's the thing. What we're going to see as we continue on is the message and the power that is seen in Jesus is the fact that Jesus did. And I make a little note here in my margin that points to verse 13. Jesus will subdue him, and Jesus will bind him. As the power that Jesus has is something that is going to be seen as unique compared to what these people were dealing with. And so this demon was completely out of control. Can you imagine the horror he was bringing on the people in this area? You imagine the sounds coming from the graveyard as he's screaming at night. It's the way that it describes this. And as soon as Jesus gets out of the boat, this man immediately approaches Jesus. What do you think was going through the minds of the local people at that point? What's that? Yeah. They know what this guy can do. And now there are visitors, there are people who have just showed. Now, was this just Jesus and the apostles in their boat that just arrived on shore? No, it wasn't, was it? As we saw back in chapter 4, that there were many boats that followed Jesus across the sea. And so that crowd of people that wouldn't leave Jesus alone, when Jesus and the apostles got in a boat, they all found boats and got in boats and followed him across too. And so there are many boats, according to what Scripture tells us, that have now landed on the shore over in the country of the Gerasenes. And so here are all these people that are there, and this guy shows up. You know the locals had to be going, oh, this is not going to be good. This could be very ugly. And because they've had too much of an experience with this guy. Now, we don't have any indication that they knew who Jesus was at this point, the Gerasenes. Remember, this is a Gentile area at this point. We do know that the word of what Jesus had been doing has spread. We've seen that. We don't know exactly to what extent yet, but most likely these people weren't aware of who Jesus was at this time. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. Right. Or Gennesaret would be another description of the Gerasenes here. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a good point. And the map that if you got one of the maps when we pass it out, you can see on the east side of the Sea of Galilee where Gennesaret is. And so that you are able to see somewhat the beginning or where they're at this time. Okay, so verse 6 says, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. Now what are the locals thinking? They have dealt with this guy. And all of a sudden, this demon-possessed crazy man is bowing down before this guy that just got off the boat. And so you can kind of imagine what's going on in the minds of the people there. Of the question, what is happening? Something's not right. Something's different. And so verse 7 says, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, what business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. Where have we heard that exact phrase before? Right here in the Gospel of Mark. You remember hearing that before? What business do we have with each other? Look back at chapter 1 and verse 24. They were demons. It was a demon at that time as well that Jesus was going to cast out. And the exact same statement is made. And something that I've done in each of these places is I've written the other references next to it. So you might write next to it, chapter 1, verse 24. We also saw in chapter 3 and verse 11, it's not the same phrase that's used, but each one of these places shows that the demons knew who Jesus was. The demons acknowledged. Now, we already talked a little bit about how did they know who Jesus was. Demons are not omniscient. They're not all-knowing. How would they recognize Jesus? And we went back and we looked at a connection, it was back in chapter 3, we looked at a connection between Jesus when he bound Satan, the strong man. When Jesus defeated him in the temptations, the demons being servants of Satan, Scripture doesn't tell us this, but it's my take on all that Satan has revealed to all of those that are working for him who this guy is. They all know, of course, and they're from a spiritual realm, which gives them a different ability of understanding than man does. But we see there's a lot going on here. But note the context. What question did the apostles ask back in chapter 4 and verse 41? We compare this to chapter 4 and verse 41. Don't they ask the question, who is this? And this is in contrast with the demon saying, we know exactly who this is. And so immediately following that event with the apostles asking that question, we have this take place where the demons reveal, we know exactly who this is. We know who Jesus is. We know that he is the Son of the Most High God. And so we see a contrast there in the text. Now, when the demon says, I implore you by God, does this mean that the demon was a believer and a follower of God? Okay, he believed, he at least acknowledged there was a God. Okay? There are some that have tried to take this and say, well, the demon must believe in God, and if he's willing to implore Jesus by God. But we need to be careful. The word that's used here for implore is the word horkidzo. Horkidzo is a word that literally means to make one swear an oath. And so what he's doing is he is trying to get Jesus to make an oath. He's not saying, let's make an agreement here. There's a different word that's used for that, for a mutual covenant between the two of us. That's not what he's using here. He is trying to get Jesus to make an oath, because the demon knows if Jesus makes an oath to God, he's not going to be able to break it. And so he's trying to save his skin is what he's doing here. And so because he knows what Jesus is, he knows what Jesus can do. And so the demon is saying, I want you to swear an oath by God that you won't hurt me. And so this isn't the demon making an oath in the name of God. But he does know that that oath made in the name of God is not going to be able to be broken. It's going to be binding. And so now what has this man been doing to all the people in the region? He's been terrifying them. He's been tormenting them, right? And what is he asking Jesus not to do to him? Don't torment me. And so he's pleading with Jesus not to do what he himself has been doing. And does Jesus agree to this deal? No, he doesn't. Verse 8. For he had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he was asking him, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now, he uses this term legion, and it may have been because legion was a reference to it's Roman, it's Greek, it's to a military size of a battalion, and a legion was a company of soldiers of somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. Usually it was 5,000 is what it's known, but somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. Now, we can't really just say that he's saying that there are 5,000 demons specifically that are there. This is a way of this demon saying there's a lot of us. There's thousands of us that are possessing this one individual. And this explains why this individual was so strong, so out of control. And so in verse 10, and he began to implore him earnestly not to send them out of the country. So you see, the demon is trying to negotiate a deal here. And they knew that Jesus had the power to do whatever he wanted to with them. And so they're just trying to figure out a way to survive. Notice he uses the word implore again. It's that same word. And so he was trying to get Jesus to make an oath with God. Now he's trying to get Jesus to make an oath to him. And promise me an oath. We've already seen where Jesus said, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. And if Jesus makes an oath, he's going to hold to it. But so this demon is doing everything he can to survive whatever is about to happen. Verse 11, now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons implored him, saying, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Okay, so here's their deal. They're offering a deal. Don't send us out of the country, but put us in these pigs instead. And so that's their deal. Verse 13 says, Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine. And the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. Now first, we have to note that they had to ask for permission. Jesus had to grant them permission. They didn't have a choice in the matter of what was going on. And so Jesus granted them permission. Jesus allowed them to have what they had offered because Jesus knew that this would fulfill the end result that he wanted. And so now there have been some that have questioned the validity of this account. And it has to do with the fact that there are swine. And because the idea that, well, if this is Jewish territory, then Jews would not be raising a herd of swine. And so there are critics that have questioned this as, you see, this would not be happening. This is a made-up story because the Jews would not be raising pigs because they're unclean under the old law. But what did we say about this land? It's Gentile. And we know that historically. In 30 BC, Caesar gave this area to the Jews. But then in 4 BC, after the death of Herod the Great, the Jews gave it back to Rome. And so historically, the events that are happening right here in Mark's account are exactly accurate. It would have been a Gentile Roman society. Would there have been Jews living in this area? Probably, like there were in most of the areas of the known world at this time. But this criticism, this challenge to the validity of this account, trying to find something, because remember in our apologetics series on Sunday night, if they can find one thing that discredits something in Scripture, it pretty much discredits most all of it, because the claim is that it is all from God. And so that's what people are trying to do. And this is just one spot that some will try to jump on. So what's the deal with the pigs drowning in the sea? There's a little more to this. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time because this is really more a theory. But it's a very interesting biblical study that I've taken a little bit of time to go through in the past. Why don't the demons just come out of the pigs when the pigs go down into the water? What's going on here? And as I said, it's just kind of a theory, but follow me for a second. Connecting a couple of other things that we see in Scripture. And here are these verses, Matthew 12:43, Luke 11:24. Those passages are parallel passages, same event. And then also Matthew 8:32. Write down 2 Peter 3 and Romans 8. We're not going to get into that this morning. Maybe we will at another time. But in Matthew 12 and verse 43, here is what is said. Now when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places seeking rest and does not find it. Why does Matthew mention that when a demon is cast out or leaves a person, it passes through waterless places? It's kind of a curious statement that's mentioned there. Okay, now Luke 11:24, it says the same thing. Here in Mark 5 and in Luke chapter 8, the record shows that the demons were cast into the pigs and the pigs all drowned in the sea. However, in Matthew 8, in Matthew's account of this, in Matthew 8:32, the emphasis points to the fact that the pigs were not the ones who died, but it was the demons who died. In our English translation, it's hard to see that, but in the Greek sentence structure, it specifically refers to the demons perishing in the water, not the pigs. Kind of an interesting, why would Matthew point that out? Matthew's the one that brings out demons going through waterless places. He's also the ones pointing out that the demons perished when the pigs went into the water. There's something about water and demons that makes this an interesting study. Demons die in water. Demons pass through waterless places. Now, Scripture does not give us any definite answers to this, and so I don't want to speculate too far. But there's something interesting about all of this, and some points to be made along this line. Like I said, note 2 Peter 3 and Romans 8, because there's a connection to all of this there too that we don't have time to get into. But we'll look at it at another time. But I just wanted to throw that out because I've seen several people make mention of this in their studies, and I thought if you're wanting something kind of weird to look into and dig into a little bit more, this is kind of a cool study. And so check it out. I think they did, because Mark and Luke say that the pigs died. But Matthew, his emphasis is on the demons. And so you know, I'd have to say the pigs died because Mark and Luke said they did. But that's not what Matthew focuses on. Well, yeah. As far as maybe why they're upset here in just a minute. Yeah. So in verse 14, it says, the herdsman ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. Verse 15, they came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Okay, so why are these people frightened? I think we connect this with chapter 4 and verse 41. Why were the apostles frightened in the boat? Because they saw the power of Jesus. When they witness this power, it creates an awe, a fright, a fear of, if he can do this, what else can he do? What are we dealing with here? And so here, this time it's the herdsmen that we're talking about and the other people in this area. But there is this fear that we're seeing now that's common, becoming more and more common amongst those that we see. In the first couple of times Jesus cast out a demon or healed the withered hand, we see that they were amazed, they were astonished, they were astounded. Now there's a different response. There's a fear that's attached to this now. Verse 16, those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man, and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave their region. Okay, so this is a different word in verse 17, implore. It's not the same Greek word. The other one was to make you make an oath. This is a different one. This one is begging. I'm begging you to do something. And so, who is it again that is described being afraid? Verse 14. It's the herdsmen, right? And they're describing to all the people that are around there what's going on. But the herdsmen are the ones that are at the center of this. And what just happened that would make them want Jesus to leave? What's that? They lost all their pigs. Yeah. Jesus just, true, true. But in this society with that many pigs, how many pigs did it say there were? 2,000 pigs. Um, I've been in that pig barn before. I used to work in one. That's a nasty place. Um, but 2,000 pigs, this society, this community, that community just lost a lot of their sustainability because of this. And so, whether it's the herdsmen and the people that are connected with them, their family, their friends, the other people that are there, this is going to have a major impact on them. And so Jesus just solved one of the biggest issues that they have had for a long time by casting these demons out of this guy that has been driving them crazy for a long time. But that's not what they focus on. They were frightened at Jesus because of the power that he has, but that's not what they focused on. They want Jesus to leave. Part of that may have been the fear. We're afraid, go away. But I think a lot of it also had to do with they're focused on the physical. I think we can go back to the parable of the sower in chapter 3. Their hearts. What kind of hearts do they have? I think we're looking at hearts probably that are either stony or weedy, where they're allowing the things of the world to get in their way from actually seeing what Jesus is doing and to allow their faith in Jesus to grow. And so, like I said, they just saw this incredible miracle take place that eliminated the biggest problem they've been facing for a long time. Most likely Gentiles. It's true. That's true. And I thought about that as well. What were the Gentiles, what were the Greeks, what were they familiar with when it came to the stories about gods? They came down, they messed with humans, they messed up the lives of humans, they did all kinds of things, and because of this extraordinary power that they believed that their Greek gods had. And so there's nothing in the text here that says that that's what they were thinking. We do have places later on, like with Paul, when they think that Paul and Silas are Greek gods. But what they just saw Jesus do, what else would a Gentile mind be thinking? Other than something connected probably with what they thought and what they believed were Greek gods. And so we know they weren't Jews because of the pigs. And so it had to have been somebody from that type of a background. So it's a very good point. Verse 18, and he was getting into the boat. The man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. Can you imagine that? That's what I'd be doing. If I had we think about, he just helped all these people. He helped this guy a whole lot more. And so here Jesus does this. I'd be the first one saying, I'm coming with you. I want to be a part of whatever you're doing. And that's what this man says, what he wants. Verse 19, and he did not let him. But he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. Now, the word proclaim there, this is our word caruso. This is to preach. And so Jesus is saying, I want you to go home. I want you to preach the good news. Preach the good things that the Lord, I've got Karux in my head. Kurios, the Lord, that he has done for you. And so this is that's why it's a key word in Mark. That's why it's in orange, because it's a key word to continue. Jesus came to preach. What was that? Chapter 1, verse 34? That's the whole reason why Jesus came. Well, now he has another spokesman. I heard one commentator make this comment. He said, in the ISBE, the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, they have an article that mentions that in 325 BC, the Council of Nicaea, there was a Christian delegation that came from this region. And they were trying to make a connection that 300 years later, there had been seed planted in this area where there was a church that was established that was big enough and strong enough to be a part of the Council of Nicaea, which is a whole nother topic if you study church history. But it's in 325 BC, or I'm sorry, AD. And so could it be, and this was the connection that person was trying to make, could it be that the seed began to be planted by this man because of the events that took place? And then when the gospel of Christ later spread, that the church was established in that area and began to grow. Kind of an interesting point of fact in history. So we'll pick up there next week and continue in verse 21.